Okay, we'll get started soon. In the meantime, would love to hear where everybody's joining from. If you go into the questions portal, you'll be able to type, and those messages will go directly to me. I know it's less intuitive. You might think it's the chat portal, it's the question. But yeah, tell me where you're here from. We'd love to see. Great, Jose is here from Boston. Awesome, my hometown. Just moved from Boston, actually. Welcome. Great, all over the world. Atlanta, New York, Ghana. That's interesting. A few from LA, which is where I moved to, believe it or not. I'm in Santa Monica, so great to have some locals. San Jose as well, Northern Cali, a bunch from New York City. Got a few from India, great. Colombia, awesome. Welcome, Johanna. I hope I'm saying that right. That's awesome. The UK, Cameron is originally from LA, in Hungary right now. Very cool. That's a cool place. Grace from Tanzania, fantastic. We got Kuwait, Chicago. Jose is saying Cambridge more exact. Okay, I'm not keeping score. A couple more, Chicago. China, fantastic. Originally from Pakistan, working and living in Boston. Great. Quite a diversity, and this is good because this shows me that the chat is actually working and that you have the ability to respond to questions and things like that. So yeah, if you're just logging in, I'm seeing the number come up a little bit slightly minute to minute. Just go into the questions and let me know where you're from, and we're going to get started in less than 60 seconds. I just know that some people have to download the GoToWebinar software, and it's not always very intuitive, so I want to make sure that that people have a chance to get in. I'm still seeing a couple people logging in as we speak. Awesome, quite a group. So again, if you're new, if you just logged in, go into the questions and let me know where you're from. Great, Michelle here from LA, awesome, right up the road. Detroit, Michigan, great. Hey, good to see you, Shimmy. Dara from New York, Chris from Boston. I know Chris, welcome. From Phoenix by way of Chicago, awesome. Germany. Japan, India, all right, awesome. Good, I guess I got the word out. We got people joining from all over the place. That's excellent. So great to have you all here. So let's go ahead and get started. I don't want to keep you waiting any longer, and I have a lot to go through today, so I don't want to delay any longer than I need to. Wow, Zimbabwe, wow, we still got more people chiming in, which is great. Good, so let's get started. Thank you so much for joining. I'm so excited for this session. I love live trainings like this, and honestly, I love this topic. I've advised so many candidates on Stanford's What Matters Most essay, and I think it's both the most difficult and the most exciting essay asked amongst all the top MBA programs. So if you're a prospective applicant to GSB, Stanford GSB, know that I'm going to work really hard for you today and make this session as hard-hitting and high valuable as I possibly can. A few housekeeping things just before we get started real quick. First, any comments, questions, or responses to questions I ask can go into the questions section, as you just realized, not the chat section. And only I and my team will see your responses and comments. I know that's not all that intuitive. You probably think you go to chat, but please forward any complaints you have to GoToWebinar and not Ryan Barba, because there's nothing I can do about that. But again, if you have questions throughout, that's perfectly okay. We will have a live Q&A at the end of today's presentation, and I'll be answering questions primarily at that time. But I do have a few members of the Ready For team here to help as well today, who will be responsive to you in real time throughout the workshop. So get a hold of them and reach out, especially if you have issues with the audio and other tech issues like that. They can help you to solve those problems to make sure that you're staying with the presentation. And third, we will not be sharing a recording of today's session. The goal here is to reward those people who took time out of their day to participate in the live training, thereby making the experience better for everybody, because you can actually benefit from hearing one another's questions at the end, and that works best if people stick around. But to incentivize you to stick around, those who do stay until the end today will receive the slide deck in their email. So I'll send out the slides in a PDF form, but only if you stay until the end, which I think only be about 75 minutes from now if I'm able to stay on track, which I'll definitely aim to do. So let's get started. I want to start by telling you just a little bit more about me to get started, just so you know why you can trust me and why my insights and expertise are credible. First, as you might know, I worked in MBA admissions for 5 years total, some years at Cornell, 3 years at Cornell, and 2 years at Keenan Flagler at the University of North Carolina. In that time, I reviewed more than 6,000 MBA applications and conducted more than 700 interviews of MBA candidates. I myself do have an MBA. I went to Cornell on a full ride, which was the biggest blessing of my life, bar none. I'm a former senior consultant with Stacy Blackman, who's one of these big MBA admission consulting firms, and I've been featured for my expertise in MBA admissions in sources like the U.S. News and World Report, MBAprograms.org, Wall Street Oasis, and recently even a couple others. In total, over my career, I've helped more than 500 candidates gain acceptance to top 10 programs, and my success over that time is 94%, which is something I'm very, very proud of. So I have 94% success rate getting candidates into at least one top 10 MBA program. And in fact, more than 40 students currently enrolled at Harvard, Wharton, and Stanford GSB are past clients of mine. Again, I'm really proud of that. Professionally, I have more than 7 years of experience as a branding and marketing consultant for top 4 Big 4 consulting firms. And I'm also a leadership expert and enthusiast, and you'll see why this is important in a little bit. But I routinely speak at events targeted toward young business professionals on leadership development, developing their leadership skills, things like that. So one last thing that you should probably know about me is I love Stanford GSB. I really do. And so I can completely identify with your enthusiasm for GSB and with your hunger to go there. I love this program. As they state very publicly, they're seeking students with a vision and a desire to make a contribution to the world through their professional careers. They want students who are driven to make innovative change happen in their careers and lives. And as such, I just love its culture, and I love the types of candidates that Stanford tends to attract. I think its entrepreneurial program is probably the best in any top business school. I think its location near Silicon Valley makes it an incredible place to go to learn about innovation and entrepreneurship and the changing dynamics of business strategy. And I just think it's a really impressive place. As I mentioned, I've worked with many past candidates to Stanford. I've kept in touch with most of them, and I've seen them go on to do these just crazy, impressive, super interesting things. I have some close connections with some of the GSB faculty, and of course, over the years, I've built some rapport with their admission officers, past and present, and it's just a place that attracts smart, interesting, exciting people. Stanford's application is definitely my favorite application to work on with candidates because I think the what matters most to you and why essay just elicits really exciting, deep responses. I learned so much about candidates as we work through crafting that essay, which for me is just so much fun. So let's get you all in. Stanford accepted 469 students last year. Right now, there's just over 100 of us in the webinar, so there's room enough for everybody to get into Stanford. So I'll give you the best advice I can to make that happen. In today's workshop, I want to teach you how to effectively and persuasively sell your candidacy in the Stanford application, and specifically through its what matters most to you and why essay. Based on what I've learned, working in MBA admissions for 5 years, and then working for more than 7 years advising candidates to top MBA programs, including working with 82 GSB candidates up until this coming year. 62 of the 82 applicants that I and my team have worked with have earned acceptance to Stanford GSB, and we're immensely proud of that. So here are the results that we've had over the last 6-7 years. You can see the number of applicants that we took on as clients, and the number of those that are accepted. You can also see that we've gotten better as we've gone on, right? We're our infancy in 2012. We've continued to get smarter on GSB and what they look for and how to really ace these essays. So our success rate has continued to grow over the years. And again, we're very proud of these statistics, especially considering the fact that Stanford's overall success rate, or acceptance rate rather, is 6%. This past year it was 5.7%. So very excited about it. So confession that yes, part of my success and my team's success comes from the fact that we've worked with some really impressive, high-achieving candidates. But not only those types of candidates. And I wanted to throw this slide in there in case you're one of those many candidates who are applying to Stanford GSB this year with a flaw. Right? There's something that's not perfect about your application. I can tell you that most candidates who get into Stanford are not perfect. And here are some stats to kind of back that up based on the 62 candidates that me and my team have helped get into Stanford over the last 6-7 years. So 26 of them had a Gmat score below 700, or this year the equivalent score on the GRE. 24 had a college GPA below 3.4. 29 came from outside the U.S., including 22 from India. 57, the vast majority, did not go to an Ivy League undergraduate school. 30, almost half, did not have traditional business work experience. So if that's you, don't be too alarmed. And at least 55, if not all 62, considered GSB a reach school for them. So hopefully that inspires at least some confidence for you as you head into this presentation. I don't want you to think that, well, this would be nice to do and implement if I had any shot at all getting into Stanford. I hope that this slide gives you a little bit of confidence that you don't have to be the perfect applicant. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful to you. House rules for today. We're going to get through this very quickly. First, what I'll be teaching you today is based on real-life strategies that I believe are repeatable and can be modeled after, but that doesn't mean that implementing them won't require some work. Right? So if you're thinking you're going to attend today's training and leave with a ready-made perfect essay that you can press submit to Stanford tonight, you're dreaming, right? Applying to Stanford takes a lot of time, and implementing the strategies that I'll be walking you through today will take some time and effort. Second, as I think I just mentioned, there's no such thing as the perfect Stanford candidate, and I'm not here to teach you how to become one. Stanford actually says this very publicly themselves, right? They're not looking for just the perfect candidate, the perfect molded candidate, anything like that. So that's not the goal of today. Third, the bar for getting into Stanford is high, but I believe there's room at the top, even for quote-unquote imperfect candidates, as I just talked about. And then finally, there's no magic pill here, right? I'm not here to be a miracle worker. I'm not here selling snake oil or trying to teach you how to trick the system. I'm trying to teach you proven, deliberate strategies that I know have worked for me and the candidates I've worked with in the past to help them get into Stanford. But if you have a 1.7 GPA and a 500 Gmat score, I'm not going to have much luck getting you into Stanford. Okay, hopefully that's fair. I don't want to set unrealistic expectations. So why have I been so successful helping candidates get into Stanford? This is important. It's certainly driven by my admissions background, my work in the admissions office, and my experience coaching hundreds of MBA candidates and my study of admission strategies that has accompanied that work. But it's also because I have a natural curiosity to understand why things work so that I can capitalize on that understanding and turn it into a repeatable best practice. You know, my mom would always say that as a kid, of her 3 kids, I was always the hardest kid to keep track of because I'd always go wandering off in random directions as a child. But that's me. I'm naturally curious. I want to understand the world around me, and I have a genuine desire to understand how and why things work. And that's important because I'm going to kind of take you with me down a similar path today. Bear with me because I really want to explain why my approach to acing this essay has been so effective. And that is because it's rooted in the best practices for effective persuasion and communication. Okay, I mentioned in my first slide that I am, by any definition, a student of leadership. As a Park Fellow at Cornell, I studied leadership at a deep level for 2 years, and I've remained a student of leadership ever since and how to communicate convincingly like a leader. I read a lot of books on leadership and persuasive communication. I even speak on these topics from time to time at conferences, alumni events, and even occasionally to business school students. So I want to start today just in the next few slides and teach you some of the best practices I commonly teach on how to communicate persuasively and convincingly, whether communicating in person or in writing, like in your MBA essays. I think this approach will make the training today a little bit more fun, a little less formal and stuffy, and frankly, because understanding the science on how to communicate persuasively like a leader will help you in so many areas of your life outside of just your business school essays. So this will be a little bit different than what you're used to if you've attended webinars in the past, But that's okay with me. And in the next few slides, I'm going to use what I know about persuasive communication to kind of tee up the presentation because, again, I really do think it applies directly. And then, of course, the rest of the 90% of the presentation will be devoted specifically to GSB content. So I want to make sure that's okay with people in attendance. Okay that I take 5 minutes to go through this stuff, just talk a little bit about how to communicate persuasively in a presentation or an essay or a pitch. I promise it'll be worth it, but type into the question box. I just want to hear from people and know that people are A-okay with hearing this part. Yes, yup, awesome. Okay, good. Yeah, a lot of people saying that this resonates. Okay, fantastic. So let's get into this. I really think this is super interesting stuff. I do. I want to start today's presentation with the ugliest, dirtiest, most disgusting, stomach-turning, vomit-inducing, hated word in the English language. I'm wondering how many of you can figure out what that word is. It is, of course, sales. Right, so I've given this presentation before. In fact, I gave this presentation on persuasive communication and leadership a couple weeks ago, and it was an entire hour devoted just to that, which is not what we're doing today, of course. But I started the same way. And I had about 200 people in the room, and I said in front of the room, now, who here in the room works in sales? And a bunch of people raised their hands, but I went to one woman who did not raise her hand. And I said, well, interesting, you said that you don't work in sales. So tell me, what is it that you do? And she says, well, I'm an artist. I'm a painter. I said, great. So what is it that you do with your art once you're done painting? And she goes, well, I bring them to auction houses and other museums, and they kind of sell them off to the public. I say, oh, I see. So you sell your paintings to people who then sell them off to people who want art. She said, yeah. I said, great. You work in sales. I then went to another gentleman in the audience who also didn't raise his hand. I said, sir, you told me you didn't work in sales. What is it that you do? He says, well, I'm an independent consultant, and I work with entrepreneurs on their marketing strategies. I say, oh, that's interesting. So you sell your expertise and knowledge to a captive audience, likely entrepreneurs, who need your advice and counsel. He said, yes. I said, congratulations, sir. You work in sales, right? And I went around the room and did that to a few more people, but the message is clear. We are, all of us, in sales, right? We all work in sales regardless of what we do and regardless of the line of our work. But none of us like to think of ourselves as salespeople. Why? What's the first vision that comes to mind for any of us when we think of ourselves as a salesperson? That's right. The cheap used car salesman who's trying to trick you into buying a vehicle, right? But in truth, the ability to sell, the ability to persuade, the ability to sell is the ability to persuade. And persuasion is an integral skill to have as a business professional and, more importantly, as a leader. And Stanford wants leaders, right? Their mission is to develop innovative, principled, and insightful leaders who change the world. So to get into Stanford, you have to prove that you're a leader. And any leader worth his salt knows how to persuade, how to convince, how to move people. And your first test to show Stanford that you know how to persuade an audience is through your application essays, right? This is your time to make your pitch and tell them why you're wonderful and you're better than everybody else, right? It's your time to show your ability to persuade and thereby to lead. And so the ability to sell is integral to have as a skill as an MBA applicant, and really, in general, as a person. And when you really think about it, the business skill application process at its core, just like any application process, is a sales exercise. It's an exercise of your ability to persuade, inspire credibility, and build rapport with your audience, the reader. You have to sell your product, right? Your story, your brand, your candidacy to the admissions committee. And just as you would have to do in a professional sales role, you have to convince your customer, your target market, in this case, the admissions committee, the AdCom, to choose your product over competing products, which in this case are other highly qualified candidates who are also competing for admission. So let's talk about the art of persuasion. So if only there was some kind of formula out there, some proven effective strategy on how to communicate effectively and persuasively and sell yourself, your idea, and your products, huh? Well, there is, and I didn't write it. This guy did. And I'm wondering how many of you can look at the slide and know who this is. I mean, you know this is an old Greek guy. This is Aristotle. right? And so Aristotle has had his formula for what makes for a persuasive, convincing argument back to, going back to the old Greek days, right? And I love this formula because it's withstood the test of time, right? The art of persuasion, the art of convincing communication, going back to Aristotle, this wasn't written yesterday by some fly-by-night motivational speaker, right? This is tried and true. So here's what Aristotle says, and here's where we can start to branch into the GSB essay, but again, this is going to tee it up directly. He says, if you really want to make a persuasive argument to another person and communicate as a leader, the first thing you need is ethos. Right? It's a Greek word that means credibility and character of the persuader. Right? In other words, no matter how good the product is, if the person pitching it is a weasel, we're never going to buy it. Right? We have to trust the person making their pitch. They have to be credible. They have to show us that they're a person of character in order to convince us that their argument is logical. Second is logic itself. Right? The logic of the persuader's pitch. Is it easy to follow? Right? Does it make sense? So on and so forth. And then third and finally is what he calls pathos, which is the emotional connection that you're able to build with your reader or your audience. I believe that if you can establish credibility and show that you're a person of character, ethos, make your case for why you're a better, unique, and worthy of acceptance in a logical way, logos, and establish an emotional connection with the admissions officer reading your essay so that they can relate to you, they're rooting for you to gain admission, they're convinced that you're the perfect fit for their program, you're leaving very little to chance. And you're giving the admissions committee every reason to accept you. So, how do you build credibility, demonstrate logic, and build an emotional connection with the reader, the admissions committee, through Stanford's trademark, what matters most to you and why? That is the essence of today's training. And so here is how I'm going to approach it. This is kind of our agenda for the presentation today. First, step one, I want to teach you how to develop your strategy for establishing credibility by choosing a what matters most theme and topic that is genuinely you, defendable, and specific enough that'll be truly unique from other applicants' topics, right? I can tell you that the vast majority to Stanford GSB just choose really bad topics. So I want to help you find yours, right? It's a hard question when you really think about what matters most to you and why. It sounds easy, but it's really not when you dig into it. So I want to help you kind of narrow that down and maybe pick your topic or at least show you the process so that after the webinar you can do that work and find the topic for your essay. Second, I want to get you clear on how you make your case logically by telling your story in a way that's easy to follow, entertaining, and convincing. Logos from Aristotle's model, right? Showing that logic. And then third, teach you how to build an emotional connection, which Aristotle called pathos, with the admissions committee by considering what it is that Stanford really looks for in applicants and ensuring that you're demonstrating that you meet their high standards. Okay, those are kind of that's the big three-step process that I'm going to walk through. I will end with some general best practices and tips to ensure that your essay is in the upper echelon of all candidates, including what not to do. I think that's important too. And then finally, as I mentioned, we'll have our live Q&A at the end. So, hoping this is resonating. Anybody with me? Anybody feeling like this is a good fit for them? This is going to be helpful? Yes, exclamation points. Okay, awesome, very helpful, very good. Somebody asked if the slides will be distributed. Yes, if you stay until the end, we'll take attendance at the end. We'll basically figure out who's still here, and the PDF will be sent to those who stay until the end. Okay, awesome. Glad that this is resonating. Hopefully it's been entertaining so far. I know for those of you in India, I got an email from somebody in India who said, my God, man, it's really late at night. Can you offer this at another time? And I said, yeah, really sorry. I'll try to make it entertaining and keep you awake. And I think she's here, so welcome. Okay, so step one, how to find your topic for the What Matters Most essay, and more specifically, how to establish credibility by choosing a topic or theme that is genuinely you, defendable, and specific enough that it's different from everybody else. This is ethos, right? So of the three, Aristotle said, you can never surrender this one. If you could only choose one, you would always choose ethos. You would always choose credibility because over time, it's the only point of relevance you have. Like I said before, right, no matter how good the product is, if the person pitching it is a weasel, will we buy it? No. Well, maybe once, but never again, right? And I wanted to share this kind of funny experience that I had, and I know that the image is a little choppy, but this is a posting I made to Facebook about a year ago after visiting a restaurant in the Marriott in Salt Lake City. The waiter walks up to me, and I ask, hey, how's the salmon dish? Is that a popular choice? He says, yes, sir, it's very good, very popular. It's one of my favorites. So I say, great, I'll take that, thanks. 3 minutes later, the waiter comes back. He goes, excuse me, sir, can you show me where on the menu you saw a salmon dish? I wasn't aware that we had one. Right? Here is a waiter who completely abolished his own credibility, right? Who went from saying, it's my favorite dish, people order it all the time, to 3 minutes later saying, can you show me where you saw that? I didn't know we had one, right? So I think this is kind of a funny way of showing the importance of credibility and maintaining it, right? So I did some thinking, and I said, okay, in trying to identify what really makes someone what really makes good credibility in leadership, after whom should we model ourselves? I decided to look toward whom I believe is the topmost authority on building leaders and see what it is that they say on how you develop credibility and character and establish yourself as a leader. So I started to think, right, who's like the ultimate priority or authority rather on what makes a really good leader like it and who develops the best leaders. So I thought about it, and my answer, well, it's got to be West Point, right? What happens when you graduate West Point? You're commissioned as an officer in the Army, right? So stakes are pretty high that they teach leadership pretty well, right? In business, failed leadership means that a project is inefficient or maybe worse, the company suffers or even fails. It's pretty bad. But in the Army, failed leadership literally means somebody might die, right? So nowhere on earth are the stakes higher to develop leaders, in my opinion, than at West Point. So West Point is very clear on what makes for an effective leader or any person credible or a person of character. They say that a credible leader of character does three things. So I'd love to poll the audience here. Again, you can type your responses in the questions tab, but what can a person do to prove that they're credible, that they're trustworthy? When you're trying to gauge whether somebody can be trustworthy or not, what are the things that you kind of look for? I'm interested to see. Show past experience. Sure. Show that they have relevant skills and can prove it. Actions, deliver on results. Awesome. State facts. Great. So a lot of you guys are speaking to the first very obvious one, I think, knowing what you're doing. There's two others. Provide evidence goes to knowing what you're doing. Great. What else? Knowing what you're doing, or knowledgeable on topic goes to know what you're doing. Sure. Okay, here's another one. They keep their promises and they follow through. That's excellent. West Point agrees. They say the second thing you have to do as a credible leader, you have to do what you're going to say you'll do, right? Now, there is one more. It's the hardest one, but it's the most important one. I'm seeing a lot of people type, your appearance matters. That's true. That's not one of West Point's principles. I'm not seeing it. That's okay. Here's what they say is a third part of what makes for an effective leader or communicator. Knowing who you are, right? And so the West Point model on leadership is the following. It's be, know, do. Forming character the West Point way. Now that seems really simple, right? But how many people do you know for whom all these things are true? Actually, not a lot, right? Very few people ever mention knowing who you are, but I'm going to tell you it's 85% of the game. To be an effective leader and communicator or influencer, anything, you have to know who you really are. And Stanford subscribes to the exact same idea that West Point does. That leadership requires character, and being a person of character requires knowing what it is you stand for. And here's their mission, right? They want to develop innovative, principled, people of principle who know what they stand for, and insightful leaders who change the world. That's their mission. And that's who they're looking for. This is why Stanford loves the what matters most to you and why question. They believe that great leaders are self-aware, know what's important to them, and pursue those things that matter most to them at all costs, right? So in their what matters most to you question, Stanford is essentially asking you, what do you value? Or what is it that you stand for? Right, so the bar is pretty high here at Stanford, as you know, and I was talking to one of the consultants on my team who worked in the admissions office at Stanford the other day, and I asked him directly, I thought it was fun, what do you think was the worst essay you ever read? And he said, well, probably the candidate who said that what mattered most to him was his dog. Not what we're after, right? Stanford wants to know more about your principles and how you plan to become a person of influence consistent with their mission statement to develop principled leaders who change the world. So if you're planning to write about your dog, you have some work to do. That's not nearly good enough. And no, cat people, that doesn't mean that you can talk about your cat either. So how do you find your what matters most topic? Getting really into the meat of the presentation here. It's a three-step process, and this is where I'm going first. And I know this is like 3 steps within step 1, so try to stay with me. Hopefully it's not too confusing. Remember that we're going to talk about how to find your topic, how to structure the essay, and how to develop the emotional connection with the reader. Right now we're talking about developing credibility and finding your topic. So finding your topic is done in 3 steps. These are the 3 steps that I bring my candidates through who are working with me on their applications to Stanford. And I'm going to go through these 3 in detail. But at a high level, 1, you inventory your past experiences and the things you've done, decisions you've made. 2, you look for patterns of the steps and decisions you've made and identify what I call your core values, which is not a Ryan Barba original term, of course. And then 3rd, incorporate your core value into an all-encompassing gerund verb statement, an ing statement, okay? So this might sound a little academic, but let's go through these one by one. Step 1, inventory your decisions. First thing I have my candidates do as they're preparing for this essay, and this is a lot of work, is to sit down and list every major decision they've made or important things that they've done starting in college, or maybe if it's relevant for them in high school. What are some examples? Research you've conducted, courses you've taken, college extracurricular activities you are participating in, internships, travel or international experiences, independent studies, books you've read, seminars you've attended, TED Talks that you keep watching over and over again, YouTube videos that are inspiring to you, jobs, obviously, that you've pursued is a big one, community service, activism, fun, the things that you do for fun, hobbies of yours, relationships that you've sought, including mentoring relationships, romantic relationships, anything like that, and what they say about you as a person, and anything else. So it takes a lot of time to kind of inventory these, and it's worth the time and effort. But once you've kind of done that, starting at whatever a good starting point is for you, likely high school or college, take a second and look for trends and themes across what you've written. Come back to your sheet in a day or 2 and analyze what you've written and ask yourself, what are some of the common themes? Are there any trends? So for me, for example, I started noticing kind of an education theme, right? I was a tutor and a mentor when I was in college, and then I graduated. I was in a sales role, but I was kind of teaching people how to use this tech software I was using, and I started a youth program in the Boston area where I was mentoring kids and teaching them how to develop their leadership skills and things like that. And now I'm in a position where obviously I'm mentoring MBA candidates, and I'm teaching them how to get into business school, and I'm teaching people about leadership. So I've always been somebody who loves to be at the front of the room instructing and providing guidance. So education was kind of a key theme for me. And I'll walk you through some other examples from past candidates in a minute. But as you're looking for patterns, what I want you to do, step 2, is start to identify what I call your core values. And these are, at their heart, the things that matter most to you. But for something to be considered a core value for you, they have to meet 4 specific criteria. So when I'm giving speeches on leadership and persuasion, like the one I gave at this alumni event a couple weeks ago, I put my audience through what I call a core values exercise, where I help them get clear on what their core values are, what they stand for, or as Stanford puts it, what matters most to them. So here are the criteria I walk those audiences through, and those same rules apply to you as you seek to identify your topic for the What Matters Most essay, as I've instructed countless of GSB candidates in the past. First thing, you cherish it, right? It's something about you that you actually like and are proud of, right? You're glad that you're kind of capitalizing on this core value and this thing that's really integral to who you are. It's something that you might kind of brag about, certainly something that you really like. Second, you chose it. Okay, so I mentioned that I've been working in youth leadership programs for a while, and as a youth group leader to high school students, I'm not ashamed to say on a daily basis that I infiltrate my own values upon them. Maybe I'm not supposed to, but I'm not even shy about it. I'm not ashamed to say, this is something that I think you should value. But I also know that the time is coming, if it hasn't hit already, when they will begin to choose for themselves. Right? So value is not going to be a core value to them because I told them, and it's not going to be a core value for you because your mom or dad either. It's okay if your mom did and then you chose it, but not just because. Same with religion, same with the company you work for. All of those may be inputs, but ultimately you chose what your core value is. Third, you've acted on it consistently. In other words, it would pass the video camera test. So if I were to follow you around for 3 weeks with a video camera, which admittedly would be really creepy, would there be any evidence to back up the idea that this is really a core value for you? Do your behaviors reflect that this is a core value? And then finally, you've sacrificed for it, or you would, and you will continue to, right, moving forward in your career. So again, I was doing this speech a few weeks ago, and I was calling on the audience, asking them what their core values were after they had gone through this exercise, and I was looking to make an example of somebody, right? And so this one guy raised his hand, and I said, you, sir, tell me one of your core values. And he said, freedom, right? And I kind of scoffed at him and said, well, I was thinking that's kind of a silly one. All right, this is a guy I can kind of make an example of who clearly didn't do enough thinking. So I said, sure, okay, sir, why don't you tell me, why is freedom a core value for you? And he says, well, I served 3 tours in Iraq, which meant that I had to leave my family behind for about 9 years and put my career on hold. So I've made a lot of sacrifices for my family and my country's freedom. Yeah. So he shut me up real quick. I should have warned you at the beginning. I have an awful case of foot and mouth disease. That was a good example. So for him, freedom was a core value, right? And here are some core values that I've seen from some candidates that I've worked with in the past who gave me permission to use the output from this exercise with you today. So education, like mine was, freedom, achievement, service, tolerance, creativity, health, progress, adventure, peace, compassion, diversity, equality, and justice, right? So yours definitely does not have to be one of these at all. They can be as well if you're consistent with these, but these are just some examples of some core values that past candidates who got into Stanford under my guidance have used. So hopefully that's helpful for you. So that's kind of step 2. And then once you have a core value or two, you'll have to pick kind of one central one, and then you want to make it into a statement starting with an ing verb. All right, so your statement of what matters to you should start with a gerund verb. So helping to, creating or establishing a, addressing the issue of, becoming a. A tool is asking, can we merge multiple values? For sure, you certainly can. These are meant to be kind of high level and simple, but I've worked with candidates who have kind of combined a couple as well and made their own statement. And I think this statement itself, the ing statement, is a way to potentially mix a couple of core values into one core statement. So what are some examples, Ryan, of past candidates and their what matters most to you and why? Here are a bunch of them. Okay, I'm not going to read through all of them. You'll see that some of them are bracketed with an asterisk. That means that we're omitting details per the candidate's request. But you can see how specific and exciting these are and how these compare with an answer like my dog. Right? So establishing more quality infrastructure in China's Northeast business market where I grew up. Addressing racial injustice in my home country, improving patient outcomes, starting a vocational training and job placement organization, something that's a little bit more aspirational and talks about what their goals are. Those are all perfectly relevant to these exercises. So this is what you're essentially after, right? So that when Stanford asks you what matters most to you and why, you can answer with something really detailed, aspirational, and inspiring like this, right? And this becomes the premise of your story, right? And then you're going to tell your story to build that credibility around why this is important to you and why you want to continue to capitalize on it. Okay, so hopefully this is helpful so far. Step 2. Now that you have your topic, or once you have your topic, I know you weren't able to do it in real time. You didn't have nearly enough time to do that. But once you have your central premise, let's get clear on how you make your case. Basically, here's how you structure the essay. Okay, so sorry, I'm having some trouble here. Let's get clear on how you tell your story in a way that's easy to follow, entertaining, and convincing. And I use the word story very much on purpose, right? Why such a strong focus on telling a story? Well, your essay is a story. It will be a story if it's written well. And there's a lot of reasons why, and it goes back to Pathos. The best practice strategies, according to Aristotle and a million different sources, on how you tell a logical story and build that emotional connection with your audience, right? So in terms of logic and structure, stories are how we think. They're how we make meaning of life, explain how things work, make decisions, persuade others, and understand our place in the world. If you're thinking this is very poetic and very well written, I agree, I didn't write it. The source is in the bottom left today. This is all from a Psychology Today article that I think really helped make my point clearly. So I'm including a few of the quotes from that article. Stories engage us through emotions and enable us to connect with others. Stories are the most effective way to share our passions, sadness, hardships, and joy, which you're going to be doing in this essay. They're the best means to communicate or share your meaning and purpose. They're the common ground that allows people to communicate, overcome defenses, and overcome differences, right? Stories are the common ground that makes somebody more effectively communicate who they are, what they're about, where they're going, and everything in between. On a scientific level, stories engage our right brain and trigger our imagination. We become participants in the narrative, right? Talk about building an emotional connection, pulling somebody into your story. We can step out of our own shoes, see differently, and increase our empathy for others. So in summary, a very poor summary, stories are the best way to logically demonstrate who you are and what you're all about. So when you're writing your Stanford GSB essay, again, you're telling your story, and you're telling it in the context of your core value statement, right? What it is that matters most to you. And I should have said before, this is an important point. When you're doing that inventory of everything you've done, the goal is not to find one central theme that explains absolutely everything you've done. Right? Everybody experiments, goes out and tries new things, dibs and dabbles in different things as they figure out who they are. Perfectly okay, but you're still looking for kind of a common theme that ropes together much of the actions that you've taken. Okay, so just wanted to go back to that really quick. So what I want to do in the next 2 slides is share with you a baseline couple of structures that I use to help candidates start their essays. Okay, so there's 2 of them. This is option 1. The next slide is option 2. And often, to be very clear, as we continue to fine-tune their essays, we start to move things around and make the essay their own. But when they're getting started and they're starting the shell of their essay, this structure is a great way to kind of approach it and build your essay. So first, maybe paragraph 1, if you want to be really little about it, for this first structure. Define the initial experience that first revealed to you your core value that has become so central to who you are. Right? Once upon a time, this one time in band camp, whatever, here's what happened. And here's how it inspired me and changed kind of my vision or inspired what's really important to me. Second, make a really clear statement about what matters most to you, your core value statement that I talked about, that ING starting phrase, and why it matters more to you than it matters to most other people, right? Why is it central to you, and what does it mean to you? Third, this is where you build your credibility. Prove your commitment by showing that you've acted on your core value consistently, how your passion for this value has matured and perhaps become clearer over time, the sacrifices you've made for it, going back to the exact definition of a core value, something that you sacrificed for, right? You've made time for it over other things, you've made other types of sacrifices, whatever, and how you've advanced your skills and knowledge relating to that core value, right? You've invested in deepening your passion or your understanding of what makes this core value what it is for you. Right? You've shown that it's something that you've lived by. Again, it passes the camera test. You can cite examples and steps you've taken through your personal life and your career that show this is really central to who I am and what it is that I stand for. And then finally, frame how that same core value is inspiring your future goals, notably your future leadership goals, to go out there, make a difference, contribute, and innovate, right? All those things that Stanford really looks for, and how you intend to continue acting in accordance with it, right? So again, I've worked with candidates that have used this exact structure, tweaked it a little bit, and that was their essay they got into Stanford, right? Having gone through this essay, obviously with a lot of work and fine-tuning in between. So as you're approaching it, this is option one. Option two goes back to my consulting days. So this is the structure that I would use when I was stepping in front of executives and pitching a solution. Right? It's what I call the Pecans Structure. Some people call it pecan. Call it whatever you like. PCAN. And basically what you're doing in an executive presentation, and you can use this for those of you who give presentations, I highly recommend it, when you're pitching why your solution is worthwhile and why you have the right answer to a question, this is a great way to be persuasive. First, say, here's the problem that we're trying to solve. Second, upon investigative research, here's the underlying cause of this problem. Here's why this problem is occurring. Third, here's the actions we need to take. To mitigate the root causes of this problem, here are the three things we need to do. And I say three on purpose because that's a very convincing way to communicate, by the way. And fourth, here's why my solution is better than the other alternatives. I understand there's some risks. I understand it's not perfect. Let's talk about what those risks are. But here, on a net benefit, on a net level, is why my solution is the best option available to you. Super convincing, persuasive way to communicate in any type of argument, debate, presentation that you'll give. So I highly recommend keep this slide in your back pocket because it helped me so much as I've grown throughout my consulting career. But to adapt this to Stanford GSB, which I've done, the problem. Here's the problem, issue, or opportunity area that matters most to me and how I can realize it, or how I came to realize it, right? So this structure, I think, is more applicable to someone whose what matters most to me statement is really deeply rooted in a specific problem that they want to solve, right? I should have said that at the beginning. So I say it in the title there, option two, for a specific problem, right? So here's the problem that matters most to me and how I came to realize it. Second, here's what's causing that problem, right? As I've grown in my career and gotten more involved in these types of activities, I've come to really understand what's at the root of this problem, for example. Third, to eliminate and mitigate those causes, here's what I've done personally to get better at solving it, right? Or to equip myself to solve it or contribute towards solving it or making it better, making it more efficient, whatever, in the future. And here's what I intend to do about it moving forward. And it's here that there's a lot in common with the first structure, right? You're articulating how your passion has matured, your sacrifices you've made, how you advance your skills and knowledge. You're basically saying, here's what I've done to both solve the problem and make myself better equipped to continue solving it or solve it even more in the future. And then finally, the net benefits. Here's why it matters to me to achieve this goal and why the benefits outweigh the risks, right? Here are the net benefits for me and for the people I want to help. And here's why I think I have a role to play in solving this problem more than anybody else, right? Here's why this is my calling and not somebody else's, right? Now, think about how unique this approach and this structure would be. Talk about differentiating from other candidates. No two candidates who really go through this process and this depth of thought would ever come up with anything even similar to one another, right? So in your efforts to really differentiate and show what's uniquely you to GSB, I really can't recommend this strategy and these structures, which kind of force you to really think, highly enough. Okay, so I promised some kind of tips and tricks as we go through, and I don't like the word tricks, but I'll throw in a couple here while we're at this part, because I think these are some other best practices in terms of structuring your essay. So here's what not to include. First, please don't start your essay with what matters most to me is ... because then you fall into the trap that 1,000 other applicants do, and the reader is already bored. So if there's one opening line to your essay to absolutely avoid, this one's it, What matters most to me is, right? You'll say that eventually, probably not in those specific words, but please don't start that way. It must include the problem, opportunity, or issue or other type of core value that matters most to you, of course. It must include where that came from, right? What kind of spawned this value? Where did it come from? It could be one event. It could be several over time as you've continued to fine-tune, become more aware of it. Either is fine. Fourth, why is it personal to you? Why does it matter to you more than anybody else, as we've said already? Again, how you've demonstrated commitment to this value by making sacrifices, investing in your skills and knowledge, understanding related to it, and then again, how it's inspiring your future goals. So regardless of the structure that you use, these are the must-have elements to this essay to do it right and to make it compelling. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the power of storytelling already, but as I mentioned again, telling a story really is the most effective way to demonstrate ethos, credibility, and character. So I was using this story here to make a case for why it's great from a logic perspective, which it is, but it's also great from an ethos, character, and credibility perspective. Again, stories enable you to show what you've done and that you do what you say you'll do. So going back to the West Point model, right? A true leader, a convincing person of character, knows what they're doing, and they do what they're going to say to do. Again, we know that Stanford aligns to this kind of same definition, and so by telling your story and showing that you've taken steps deliberately in alignment with your core values, you are showing them that you're doing what you say you'll do. Right? You're doing what really matters to you, and you know what you're doing because you've invested time, energy, and made sacrifices to advance your skills, your knowledge in this area, and your ability to continue contributing toward it at a high level, both during and after business school. Right? And by the way, stories build an emotional connection with your audience. Right? Pathos is included here too. There's so many reasons why I really like this structure. It really does hit all of Aristotle's three parts. And so that's my transition to step 3. Get clear on how you're going to establish an emotional connection with the Stanford Admissions Committee by considering what it is that Stanford looks for in applicants and ensuring that you're demonstrating that you meet their high standards. So how do you build emotional connection with an audience, whether it's through an essay or a presentation? Well, emotional connections are established when you can prove that you share values and opinions with another person, right? I think we all know that intuitively. So any effort to establish an emotional connection should be approached by asking the question WIFM, WIFM. Any guesses? Feel free to use the question box on what WIFM stands for. Anybody know? It's probably something some of you have heard before. Yes, Jose, first one is it. What's in it for me, right? Really, you want it to be what's in it for them. Right? You don't want to start thinking about what's in it for me when you approach this essay. You want it to be what's in it for them. You really want to know what is it that Stanford looks for. So what is it that Stanford values, right? What is it that's important to them? Well, they tell us, right? They say this right on their website. So this is no like special insider knowledge that I have that nobody else like you has access to. This is coming directly from the Stanford website. 3 things they look for. First, personal qualities and contribution. And I've highlighted some of the things that should look familiar to you because we've talked about them already. Authenticity, right? They want authentic people who know what they stand for and act on who they are. They know who they are, not simply what they've done. They're your experiences, beliefs, passions, dreams, and ambitions, right? These are the things that they want to know. And these are the things that we're telling them in your essay, right? We're articulating all this stuff, that you're authentic, that you know who you are, that your experiences, that you have experiences and beliefs, passions, dreams, and ambitions that kind of align together, right? So see, hopefully, how we've already started to hit a lot of what Stanford is already looking for. Second is intellectual vitality. They want you to convey your passion, dedication, and genuine interest, right? And expanding your intellectual horizons. Intellectual vitality. And then third, they want demonstrated leadership potential. And how do they define that? It's demonstrated through your personal character and professional competence, right? They want character. People of character. Sound familiar? Competence is basically, and then competence, as you see there, is basically knowing what you're doing, right? Character equals ethos, right? Evidence of behavior is consistent with your ideals. That's exactly what we're speaking to in this essay. Here's what matters. Here's how I've capitalized on it. Here's how I want to continue to capitalize on it, right? Going back through our structure. Next, they want to understand your personal motivation and convictions, And we talked about that. That is what matters most to you, and they want to see that you have a desire to make a lasting impact, which is why in the structure I shared with you, we're talking directly to, here's how my core value is going to inspire where I'm going and the difference that I want to make in the world. So, in other words, Stanford is looking for candidates with strongly held convictions and values who have demonstrated a commitment to those core values through their actions and sacrifices, invested into developing relevant skills and knowledge related to what matters most to them, and can articulate the contribution they want to make in their careers. Right? That's what they're telling us. Hopefully this all sounds familiar. So if you follow the steps and the structures that I walked you through earlier in figuring out your core values and scripting your essay using one of the templates that I shared, you've already done this. In other words, I actually considered these things, as I probably should have, when initially structuring this approach. Right? So just by following that example and speaking to the core of what your core values are, you're already building an emotional connection with your audience. And frankly, that's why they ask the question. Right? They want to see who fits into their culture and who has a real good sense of who they are, what they stand for, and how they're going to capitalize on it moving forward. And then on top of that, Stanford's second essay, Why Stanford, kind of gives you the opportunity to clearly articulate how you intend to take advantage of what GSB has to offer, and as such, how you intend to contribute, right? What's in it for them during your time as an MBA student and beyond. Okay, so that's how you build your kind of emotional connection. It's actually already baked in to everything that I taught you before around building a story, following that formula, getting clear on what your core values are, and finding the core values that are truly in the essence of who you are as an individual. So some last minute kind of tips and tricks, right? What I've learned after advising 82 Stanford applicants and seeing which 62 of them get in. First, don't be too formal in your essay. I think that's a really good best practice. Keep your language conversational. No to be or not to be language required, right? Second, Stanford is really transparent about not wanting to see specific things, but wanting to see unique expressions of what makes you you as a person tick. Those who adhere to that are successful, right? So they don't have a mold. They don't have a typical candidate. So if you're approaching your essay from the standpoint of, well, let's tell them what they want to hear and let's be like other people who were in the classes before me and try to fit their mold, recognize that they don't have a mold. They really do love uniqueness, and their essay affords you the opportunity to really articulate what is unique and different about you. Third, be willing to brag a little bit. Successful candidates are not afraid to brag without sounding conceited. You do have to kind of showcase your past successes and the things that you've done and the impact you've had, because again, they're looking for people of impact, of innovation, who are making a difference and want to continue making a difference, right? GSB claims directly that past successes are the best predictor of future behavior. So when in the structure I shared with you, when I'm walking you through, talking about how you've capitalized on that core value and continue to achieve and build relevant expertise and knowledge, that's why, right? You need to brag a little bit without being totally braggadocious, right? And then fourth, as I mentioned a little bit before, don't try to weave threads that don't exist. The goal here is not to weave together everything that you've ever done and say that every decision goes back to your core value. Because again, that's not true for anybody, right? We've all dabbled in different things. We've all gone through our own self-exploration where we're trying different things and finding who we are. And most people do that during or right after college, right? So don't try to say that every decision you've ever made is consistent with this one theme. Barely anybody, if anybody, is that focused. You're looking to see kind of the majority play, right? If you look at the things that you've inventoried and the steps you've taken, taking a step back and seeing what are some of the biggest common themes that have driven how I'm making decisions and what I'm prioritizing. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful. I'll pause there. Helpful so far? You can go ahead and type right into the question box. Okay, awesome. Seeing some great responses. Perfect. Okay, so, oh, good. Awesome. Puts the essay in perspective. I feel like I can do any essay or pitch now. Good, Sabrina. Thank you. That's exactly what I want to hear from people. I can do any essay or make any pitch now. Perfect. Yeah. Really love the Pecans Structure. Love the Aristotle model. So glad that this is resonating. Thank you. This is awesome. So, before we get into the Q&A, as you might expect, I do want to take a step back right? So you invested in watching this webinar tonight. You know that getting into Stanford is really competitive, and you know that following proven strategies and approaches will be more likely to get you into a top program than will winging it. So if you are someone who really is determined to get into Stanford or one of the top 10 schools, who meets kind of their basic requirements, right? You have work experience, you have somewhere in the range of their GMAT, GRE scores, and their GPAs, and who's thinking you might benefit from professional admissions help, as you might see coming, we have services for that. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a pitch here before we get into the Q&A and try to make it quick. But I do want to tell you a little bit about the services that we offer because we love working with candidates who are applying to these top programs, and especially for me, as I mentioned, I love working on the Stanford application. So we all know that hiring an expert is the best way to do something that we've never done before. Like if we look at businesses that hire consultants and see how much money they spend on them, it's a lot, right? So I truly believe that acceptance into a top program requires not only solid test scores, which can be overcome, but more importantly, a really solid pitch and really a holistic marketing strategy. So when I was working for one of the big admission consulting firms in the past, this is something that really made me better, right? I had the top success rate of the firm I worked for before for 2 out of the 3 years I was there, the second and third year. And it was because I brought my candidates through a much deeper strategy development phase. And this is general advice, whether you use us for our services or not. Before you approach the admissions process, really get clear on everything we talked about today. Like really get clear on who you are and what it is that separates you apart. What is your marketing strategy to differentiate yourself from other candidates? And if you'd like me to kind of help you implement some of the things we've gone over and help you on your applications, I'd be delighted. So here's how we'll do it. And here's what I've got. So I have a small team of admissions consultants who work directly with MBA candidates applying to the top MBA programs. Each of them attended and worked in admissions for a top-tier program. And there you see the schools for which we have representation. So we have consultants who went to school and got their MBA or worked in admissions from HBS, Wharton, Stanford, we have 2, MIT, we have 2, Booth, we have 3, Kellogg, Tuck, and then myself who went to Johnson. Kind of interesting that I'm the only one on the team who didn't go to a top 10 school. Cornell's got to up their game. But each consultant on our team only takes on 2 or 3 candidates at once. Over the past 3 years, 94% of our candidates have earned acceptance to a top 10 program. David is asking, what is the definition of a top 10 program? It's the top 10 when you look at sources like the U.S. News and World Report, Financial Times, those types of schools. So the schools that you would probably expect. 70% of our candidates over the last few years have gone to a top 10 program with at least some scholarship money. So we take on a very small number of candidates every year who we work with one-on-one and literally walk you through the entire application process step by step. So just as we did this past year, we're going to be taking on 25 candidates this upcoming year, and we're currently accepting applications for our services for the upcoming admissions seasons. We're trying to be a little bit different in our approach. There are a lot of consulting firms out there, quote unquote, who don't provide high enough value and resort to kind of higher level coaching and prioritize making money. And what I mean by that is they take on a ton of candidates just to kind of monetize the business as much as they can. We are very purposely trying not to be that. So I mentioned that I worked for a big MBA consulting firm in the past, and I'm not knocking them because I had a great experience there and I learned a lot and I was very successful helping a lot of great people get into business school. So this is not a dig at them at all. But at one point working for that firm, I had 23 candidates, right, just to myself. And so I was working until 5 a.m. every morning on 5 cups of coffee trying to edit people's resumes and essays, right? So we're trying to be different than that. So we are strict in our consulting hirings, but we limit the number of candidates we take on, right? So every one of our consultants only works with 2 or 3 people per season to ensure that every candidate gets full, undivided support and attention. I mentioned, again, we're strict in our hiring standards, so we don't hire English teachers, high school English teachers. We don't hire just career counselors. We hire people who have MBAs from top programs and worked in admissions and have a track record of helping candidates. So we don't have any newbies on the team. We only hire people who have a lot of experience and we know have gotten results and will get results, right? Same as Stanford. Past success equals future success. As I mentioned, we go deeper in developing your unique personal story and brand. I think one of my favorite stories from the firm I used to work for is actually when a candidate complained about me. So the candidate complained to my boss at the firm, again, it's a big place, and basically said, hey, when I was pitched about these services, I was told that I was going to get a 30-minute kickoff call and that we would start working on our applications. Then I get on the phone with this Ryan guy. He holds me on the phone for 90 minutes and then schedules another call the next day saying we still need to fine-tune my strategy. What gives? Right? So that was kind of a funny complaint, I thought, but I think it is kind of representative of what set me apart. And what sets my team apart, because we've kind of trained in these same types of ideals, is we go really deep in helping you develop your strategy and helping you develop what I call your client brand, so you're really clear on how you're better and different from other candidates when you're making your pitch to the admissions committee. And I'll tell you what, that candidate who complained about me ended up getting into MIT, Sloan, Stanford, and Kellogg. So he wasn't complaining after that. And I mentioned some of our success rate. No need to rehash that. But one thing that does kind of separate us apart too, since we're now with Ready 4, we can give you free Gmat and GRE training if you sign up for consulting. So if you're still studying for the test, as a consulting client, you have access to the Ready 4 Gmat and GRE online and hybrid trainings, which are typically sold at like $500 plus, depending on the programs, a pop. So that's included if you're still studying and you still need some more prep. So that's kind of another thing that we're trying to do. We're trying to offer kind of this holistic support and strategy, right? So you can take the test and then move on to admissions, and you know that you're working with some of the best in the biz throughout. And all of our instructors at Ready 4 scored in the 99th percentile on the Gmat or GRE, so you're in very good hands. Again, we're taking 25 on this year, took the same amount on last year. Last year, 24 of the 25 earned acceptance. The one who didn't was a round 3 Harvard applicant who begged us to take him on. And he had a strong candidacy, so I said, yeah, we'll give it a try. And as you might know, getting into Harvard round 3 is almost impossible. In fact, they've just eliminated their round 3 deadline for next year. But he didn't get in. And then my team of consultants was really mad at me because we had a 100% success rate, and all of a sudden we had a candidate who was dinged. So now we have to say our success rate was 96%. So hopefully next year we'll do better. But 18 of those 24 accepted a scholarship offer to a top-tier school. So again, just to be transparent about our results, here are some of the results we've had over the last 6 years working together as a team. 238 acceptance letters to top 10, including 108 to HBS, GSB, and Wharton. Cumulatively, $5.7 million in accepted fellowships and scholarships, including 34 full rides. Right? So we know what we're doing. I think our strategy has worked. The team I've assembled are great. They're hardworking. They're smart. They know MBA admissions, and we have a track record to kind of prove it. And I like our strategy that we only work with a small number of candidates. So our goal this year, frankly, we want to get everybody in. Right? We were 24 for 25 last year. We're taking 25 on this year. We're hoping for 100%. See if it happens. It's definitely our goal, and we're going to be working together behind the scenes to ensure that every candidate is putting forward their absolute best applications to get into a top program. And to be clear, we're happy to take on the tough cases. Like, we have our standards and who we take on because we are going to fill the capacity if last year is any indication. But don't feel like you can't apply just because you have a low GMAT or GRE or undergraduate. You're not alone. Your application is not dead on arrival if that's you. We're selective on who we take on, but we're not selective in terms of red flags and whether a candidate has a weakness. Really, we're looking for people who we know are determined to get into a top-tier program and can really articulate to us why that's important to them and how hard they're going to be working with us, right? Because this is a tough process. We have a reputation for being the hardest firm to work with because we work you harder in terms of developing your strategy. We're actually really proud of that brand. Not that we're hard to work with, but we have kind of extra steps in our process that make us more diligent and that cause you to work a little bit harder throughout the process. I'm seeing some questions come in. Hold those just for a second. We're going to get to Q&A in a second. Holistic approach to consulting. Here's everything that's included. So our candidate strategy and brand development takes a few phone calls, usually some thoughts, some debates, some strategizing. It's my favorite part of the process. I love it. We'll help you in choosing the schools that you're applying to. We'll help you in creating your application timeline. So if you're applying to these 5 schools, maybe you're applying to 3 in round 1, 2 in round 2, which schools belong where, and we'll create kind of a timeline for you so you know what you're working on each week. And then unlimited edits of all your application materials themselves. So your resume, your essays, your recommendations. We'll help you with recommender selection and coaching as well. The application form, which often has small essay questions too that you need to consider. We kind of look at those like any other essays. And then as much interview prep and mock interview as you need. So we're gonna train you and we're gonna drill you until you are ready to step into Stanford and absolutely ace their interview once we get you an interview. And then from there, scholarship identification, pursuit, and negotiation. And I know some people are asking about scholarships. We'll talk about that a little bit. But that first point, I think, is what really sets us apart. We really do dig deeper into helping you develop your own personal candidate strategy and brand so that you're really clear on what differentiates you from other candidates. Speaking of scholarships, that's an important part of the process. So our goal is not to just get you in, but hopefully to get you a scholarship as well. And that's actually the key measure upon which we measure our own ROI. So the typical candidate that we worked with last year got a scholarship of $19,000 a year, which is about $40,000 over the 2 years, right? So if you look at our consulting services, and I'm not afraid to say they typically start around $7,000 for a 3-school package. If you get $40,000 in scholarship offer over those 2 years, that's a pretty good ROI, right? $7,000 investment gives you $40,000 in scholarship. That's like a 600% return, not even counting the value of the MBA itself, which is obviously going to do a lot for your career, as you already know, or you wouldn't be here. But we have our eyes toward helping you get scholarships too, and we really do coach you through that process. And that's one thing that I do think separates us apart, is we know the practices and best practices around negotiating scholarships and really kind of squeezing these schools for everything they're worth, to be honest. And that link is to schedule a consultation with me. It's basically our two-way interview, if you will. I'm going to ask you some questions, see if you're a good fit for the program, whether you're, see the schools you're targeting, understand a little bit more about your background and your candidacy. And then I want to answer any questions that you have as well about your candidacy, about the program, about what's included, and so on and so forth. And so again, we are selective in who we want to talk to. So only book time with me if you're ready and you're really committed to this. So a good candidate for our program is someone who's targeting a top 20 program, right, including probably a couple of top 10s, just because that's our area of expertise, right? So if you're applying to schools ranked in the 40 to 50 range, like, great, good for you. I genuinely wish you all the luck in the world. You're just not a great fit for us, right? Because our expertise really is in the top 10 programs, top 10 programs. That's where we've worked more extensively and where a lot of us got our degrees and worked. Again, we're looking for people who can articulate their willingness to work hard, and then obviously people who can afford us. We're being selfish there in that third bullet. But these are the people that we're kind of looking for. I mentioned that we work together behind the scenes. We do. So for example, if you're applying to Stanford and Kellogg and you work with the Kellogg consultant, we're going to share your Stanford application with our Stanford consultant always. And really, we all have expertise across all the top 20 programs, not just the schools where we went to school and the schools where we worked in admissions, but we do work behind the scenes to ensure that every one of your application kind of meets the bar for the entire team. And there's a reason for that, because as you're working intently with a consultant over several months, that consultant really gets to know you really well, and you're kind of working together to formulate your essays and your strategy, and that consultant becomes a little bit less of a third-party neutral source or resource, right, because they've been so ingrained in the process. So it's nice to take your final application and run it by a few other consultants on our team who can look at it with fresh eyes, who don't know you as well as the consultant you're working with does, and so on and so forth, just to provide that third-party perspective. So we do that all the time. I do too as well. Like I always get involved with just about every candidate in some way. Like I love the strategy part, so I'm always joining the kickoff calls and strategy calls. I'm always reviewing final drafts of essays or hopping on calls here and there to chime in with my opinion because I'm kind of the boss. I lead the practice, so I have the right to kind of hop in wherever I want to without micromanaging my team, of course. But you'll be working with me as well. I'll make sure of that because I really do love this work. So again, click on the link that Julie just sent out. Here's the URL. If for some reason that's not working for you, and that's going to send you a link to book 20 minutes with me on my calendar. As I mentioned, we have a reputation for being the consultancy that's going to work you harder, and we will, because we do a lot more forethought in terms of developing your strategy, but I think we have the best track record in the industry. And here are some past candidates who have worked with us on their Stanford applications who, as you can see, don't have the perfect Gmat scores and GPAs, things like that. who have weaknesses in their profile. So again, as I mentioned before, we don't just work with perfect candidates. We're happy to take on the quote-unquote tough cases if we're convinced that they're top school material and that they're going to work really, really hard with us to do well. And we have a pretty blunt approach, right? So we're not the best firm for everybody. Like if we see something wrong in your resume or your essay, we're going to tell you, right? Some people need a different delivery, right? They want like a compliment sandwich, like, hey, this was a really good try. You might want to tweak it this way. But again, I think you're a great person, whatever. But we're very blunt in our approach. Most candidates appreciate that, but that is kind of our style. We aim to be as efficient as we can in ensuring that our candidates get into the best schools in the world, and we're not going to BS you on what it takes to get there. We're going to work you as hard as we have to. We're going to be as blunt in our feedback as we need to. That's just our style, and that's reflected in who I take onto the team, the consultants that I take on. But our success rate, I think, is unparalleled. I love this work. I really do. It has become my life's mission. As I talked about, education was always kind of a core value for me. I love the goal of helping candidates get into top-tier business schools. I really do. I love getting those calls from candidates after they got the call from the Harvard admissions committee who call me in tears and say they never could have done it without me, and they send me these glowing emails and things like that. That makes this life really rewarding for me. I really do love this work. Worked with candidates from, I think, 26 different countries at this point, from all different types of backgrounds, applying to all the top-tier schools. It really is something that I'm really passionate about and I love. So if you're interested in our services, here's the URL. I'm done with my pitch. Hopefully that wasn't too painful. Great. Okay, awesome, everybody. Looks like people are mostly saying thank you. You're all very welcome. Again, I love this work. I love doing these presentations. I love being able to talk to candidates like this. So really appreciate your time tonight, and look forward to talking hopefully with a lot of you really soon. Would love to work with you and learn more about your backgrounds and where you're going.